Okay. So Astrid, do you want to start?
Yes, thank you very much. And first of all, thank you for inviting. I'm very happy to be able to be here to talk about this topic. I think myself it's super interesting, so it's good to have a chance to discuss with others as well. So yeah, my name is Astrid Solhaug. I'm a senior advisor at the Norwegian Digitalization Agency. Before I started here, I've been working for almost 8 years in Brussels, amongst others as a seconded national expert in the EU Commission. In the agency today, I'm part of a national resource center for sharing and use of data that work to facilitate data sharing between public sector agencies, businesses, NGOs, and academia. And I have a master in social sciences, so I do not have a legal background. So when I read the Data Act, it's not from a legal perspective, but more from a policy perspective, thinking about what this will mean from a more policy and a societal perspective. So I think that's it.
Thank you very much, Astrid. Let's go to Anna now. So if I can move to the next slide. So, and we have issues with the computer. Maybe Anna, you can already start. We'll find a way to share the screen. Sorry for this, Anna.
No problem. Hello, everyone. My name is Anna Ludin. I'm very happy to be here today. Many thanks for the kind invitation. I'm a policy officer at the European Commission, DG Connect, and here as a national seconded expert, just as Astrid was before. And I work in the unit responsible for data policy and innovation, and also responsible for the Data Act proposal. So very happy to speak to you about this today. And I was previously at the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs in Berlin, also responsible for the topic of the data economy.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Anna. I think like I mentioned, I think we have the right people that know about this topic to share, let's say, information with us today. Quickly about myself, I'm Sebastian. I am the CEO of PostLab. I have been a former innovation manager myself for a couple of years for large US and German companies. Created PostLab that is all about helping collaboration in R&D to succeed. So we are developing a platform that I will explain you quickly afterwards. And recently, I'm also giving some lectures about bringing innovation to market. Because our topic is collaboration, R&D, and innovation in Europe, I propose to organize this workshop because, again, I think this is a piece of information that is valuable for all of us. What I would like to start with is to maybe have a quick survey to, let's say, to know a bit more about, let's say, what are your expectations of today. Need to share the QR code. To know about, let's say, your expectation of today. So we would like to know, what do you expect? What do you want to learn? That's going to be important for us, let's say, the speakers, and me as a moderator, to try to be as precise as possible on what your expectation of today. You can simply scan the QR code with your phone, and we'll be able to see the result live. And so that all our speakers can have a better understanding of what you expect today. So I'll give you, let's say, 1 or 2 minutes to scan the QR code, to start to answer, and then we'll share the results with you. Thank you. Okay, so I think you have enough time to scan the QR code. We are going to see, let's say, what kind of results we have. Let's share another screen where we should have hopefully some information. Yes, we do. So let's share it big. So what we have, yeah. Okay, so understand the EU Data Act, learn more about the Data Act, more information, learn more about EU policies, more insight to the Data Act, Privacy Act, but also the potentially locate collaboration partners. Okay, understanding the Data Act, know more about the main component of the Data Act. I'm just learning more about EU policies, to know more about the EU Data Act. So I think it's quite homogeneous. Very good. Thank you very much for taking the time to look at this. So before we go into the topic of today, I will quickly present you, let's say, in a nutshell, let's say, what is PostalLab. So let me give you one moment so I can share my screen with you. PostalLab, and then we go directly into the question that we prepared for our guest speakers today. So in a nutshell, so PostalLab, so we are a startup based in Mainz, next to Frankfurt in Germany. And our aim is to enable and structure a partnership. So innovation partnership. So whenever, let's say you have an organization, R&D driven organization, for example, that is into chemical industry, packaging industry, or the overall circular economy in general, there's a lot of partnerships that are involved in order, let's say, to address the market needs and also especially to share information in between the different partners. So we are developing this platform that can be used for an organization, and this organization can simply invite their partners on PostalLab to collaborate together. And via this platform, you can easily map out what are your partners, what are their capabilities, what are their skills, who is involved into the partnership, what kind of document did you already sign together, NDA, MOU, commercial contract. And what is also very much important, when you start, they say to work together, you can keep people aligned via a Kanban system that is inside the platform, as well as guidelines for the partnering team. Share information, so all the information can be mapped and can be easy to find, all the information that can be exchanged in between the partners. And in the end, because we have all this information that is tagged, you can easily identify via a knowledge graph who knows what and to whom you can ask for within your organization, or even with, let's say, the partners you're working with throughout your organization. So in a nutshell, this is what we are. If you want to know more about us, feel free to reach out to me. We'll be more than happy to show you a demo of our solution. For information, we are working already with BASF and ZACS as some examples. Okay, good. So that's it. Let's go into the question that I'm going to start with Anna. So I think, like most of people, let's say, mentioned into the chat, I would like to know, can you please give us, let's say, an overview of what is the EU Data Act? Can you explain us a bit, let's say, what is the EU Data Act, basically?
Okay, I'm trying to be brief, but it usually takes a few minutes, but I'm going to give you the nutshell of what the Data Act is. So first of all, it's a legislative proposal. It's been out since February this year, so quite fresh. And it's one of the proposals implementing the EU data strategy, so the policy document actually announcing in February 2020 already the goals of the Commission in terms of data policy. And in this document, there were a couple of non-legislative and legislative measures announced. Among the non-legislative, you might have heard about the common European data spaces. Maybe we are going to talk about this later. But among the legislative measures, there were two horizontal instruments announced. One is the Data Governance Act and the other one, the Data Act. The Data Governance Act is already adopted since June this year and will be applying from September next year. And that was looking at instruments that would incentivize the voluntary sharing of data among actors. Now, the Data Act has this fabulous aim of actually making the allocation of value creation in the data economy fairer. And how do we do that? With different elements. So the Data Act has at least 4 or 5 different elements, which I would like to briefly summarize so that you have an idea what it is about. And in general, we can say it is about enabling more actors to actually make use of data in any kind of constellations in any sectors. And for that, there are also mandatory data sharing obligations. I will start with that element because it's probably the most prominent one of the proposal. So if you look at chapter 2 and 3 of the proposal, you will find rules about accessing and using actually data from IoT objects. So around any IoT objects, basically, the proposal comes from this perspective of an object. It can be a car, a washing machine, it could be an industrial machine, anything that is connected and generates data with its use. Not only the manufacturer should have of course, continue to use the data. We don't affect the manufacturer's position, but also the user of such a connected object, may it be a consumer or a company, should actually be able to access the data and make use of it. And for that, we actually clarify that he indeed has a right to access the data and also port it to a third party, so enable a third party to access the data, so that there would be actually more innovation in the aftermarkets, be it, for example, repair and maintenance services around such objects, not only offered by the manufacturer, but hopefully in future more and more by other services. That's only one element of the Data Act. I will briefly also say something about the different other elements. Then you will find in Chapter 4 an unfairness test in contractual relations on data sharing. So in the B2b data sharing constellation, where you have a contract, this unfairness test will avoid that basically in a constellation where a contract is unilaterally imposed on an SME, this SME will have to deal with unfair clauses. So these unfair clauses are prohibited, and the scheme should bring the SME back to the negotiating table to have a say in the contracts that govern basically the sharing among businesses. And then a third element of the Data Act is B2g data sharing. Here we look at business to government data sharing, meaning how can the public sector actually access privately held data in certain situations. It is not a scheme looking at this topic in general in any kind of scenario, but really in exceptional need situations. So we tried to make this framework as concise and precise as possible, really also coming from the pandemic, where we've seen that public authorities were really in need to get, for example, mobility data, aggregated mobility data, to also then have a better idea of which policy measures could help in combating the virus and in having precise measures here. So this framework in Chapter 5 enables public authorities to get access to privately held data, also for compensation, I have to say. Only in emergencies that would be for free. And then used this data for specific purposes. And then last but not least, you will also find provisions on enabling the cloud switching. So we aim to have a more competitive, more fluid cloud market offer. And for that, basically, cloud service providers will be obliged to enable the switching of cloud services. So every user of cloud services, be it businesses or even consumers, will not be longer locked in with one cloud service provider, but contractual hurdles, costs, and also technical hurdles should be more and more reduced in view of a more fluid and competitive cloud market offer. And then a final point I would like to mention is the provisions on interoperability. Here, there is also a general mandate foreseen for the Commission to step in where industry-led initiatives do not suffice. So basically, we all know that interoperability is a key subject for the data economy to reduce transaction costs when it comes to data sharing. So this provision on interoperability basically enables to also be active here, especially regarding cross-sectoral data use, if that's needed, for example, also for the creation of common European data spaces, as mentioned before. That's it in brief. I hope that was already insightful.
A lot of insights. Thank you very much, Anna. So when we were preparing this workshop, there was also a lot of discussion about the EU Data Act. Is also one of the main goals is to help have European SME more, let's say, innovative, more competitive against other big markets. So maybe if you can also explain, let's say, maybe again a little bit, how, let's say, from a company perspective, also maybe Astrid, from a company perspective, how can we, as a company, I have a company myself, how can we benefit again from this openness of the EU Data Act? I have a feeling it's also kind of open innovation in some way. No, it's a kind of a fancy word these days. Can you maybe also explain, let's say, how it can help us companies B2B to be more innovative and competitive on the marketplace?
Sure. So first of all, I would say if you use an IoT objects, be it as owner or renter or lessee, you could get access to the data and make use of that data, also give it to a third party and and possibly benefit from cheaper services around your IoT object when it's a machine, for example, predictive maintenance solutions that could become cheaper in the future because you have a larger offer of players who could actually work with your data. And then, of course, you will have hopefully also cheaper cloud services, for example, because of a more competitive offer. So that's two examples that might be useful as a starting point. Astrid.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Anna. Astrid, let's say you have been in touch with several companies and organizations about this. So what do you hear from the market about this, and in your way, how is it the perception or the reaction from the stakeholders you're talking to?
Well, I think the main issue there is that there isn't that much perceptions or reactions yet, because I think a lot of people are not aware of what is coming and what this may actually mean. So that's a bit why I also try to talk about this when I can, because I think to me this is very interesting because it represents a bit of shift in mindset in the way we think about data. Because the EU Commission is now referring to data as a non-rival good and basically saying that instead of, as it's been until now, we've largely had often large companies that collect data and that then use them or do not use them in the way that they want themselves and do not share them, at least not on a large scale with others. Maybe sell them to some extent, but it's very much the ones collecting data who own them. But now with this kind of shift of mindset, data is seen as a non-rival good that many different actors can use and reuse at the same time without the data losing quality or value. Yeah. And that is really a new way of thinking about this, which I find very interesting. And I think one good example could be, for instance, if you drive a Tesla, then while you use your car, Tesla will be collecting all kinds of data, for instance, about the technical state of the car. And then if the car breaks down, you can now actually ask Tesla and say that I want the data that has been generated from my car, for my use of the car. I want the technical data, and then you can choose to take those data to a different local company, maybe, who could do the service on the car at a lower price. So you open up then for different providers. You can get a much broader offer. So you that generate the data, whether you're a private person or a company, you have a completely different access and ownership to the data that you generate. And also I think there are kind of two interesting elements here, that you have the Data Act that provides the legal access to much more data. But then, as Anna said as well, that you need a certain level of interoperability to be able to use the data efficiently. So then you also have the data spaces that are also being established from the EU, where you have these sectoral spaces where you get the infrastructure to share data, and also the governance structure for pooling and processing and sharing data. So you get kind of the legal possibility, but also the infrastructure. Yeah. So it gives you a completely different access to data than before.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anna. Astrid, right. Actually, talking about the spaces, I mean, let's try to, I think we have a pretty good understanding of what is it, what is the vision behind it, but let's say from an execution standpoint, from an implementation standpoint, let's say all the companies, how does it work? Let's say you're talking about spaces. How does it work? Do you have some concrete example, please?
I don't know if Anna maybe knows this more in detail than what I do. I haven't dug into the details of the data spaces, but I know that there are within different sectors. You have, for instance, the health is the first one coming up, where the legal basis for the health data space is out for discussions now. There was a public consultation that ended quite recently. So you will get then the infrastructure to share that in this health data space, you can share health data across Europe. And you will have that in several different sectors, for instance, in manufacturing, energy, mobility, and so on. And then together, all of these sectoral data spaces will form a kind of European internal market for data.
Okay, maybe Anna, you want to maybe add something on this topic?
Sure. For those of you who are interested to learn more about where do these data spaces stand today, there is a staff working document that was released on the same date as the Data Act proposal, summarizing the state of play of the different data spaces. Indeed, the data spaces are in different responsibilities and different DGs, but we as DG Connect try to have the overview and also coordinate in general, of course, how these data spaces proceed in their creation. And maybe just as a general note, our general understanding of what a data space actually is, it's a combination of governance rules and technical infrastructure. And regarding the technical infrastructure, of course, there is funding going mission. And then, as Astrid explained, for example, for certain data spaces, as the health data space, there will be additional sectoral instruments also, complementing basically the legislative framework for all actors to join then together and exchange data. That's the vision.
Mm-hmm. About this space, is it some kind of repository of data where we, as a company, we say, yes, I'm fine to kind of transfer my data on a continuous basis with some kind of means? Is it the way it's being thought?
So that's why I mentioned this kind of definition of governance rules combined with a technical infrastructure to actually avoid that this is just a database. It's not just a database. It could be maybe also some kind of actual data sharing at some point, but I think for the moment it's more the construction around how to bring stakeholders actually together and agree on a set of rules. And with that, I don't mean legislation as such, but who can use which kind of data sets on which conditions, and how do you architecturally structure such a data exchange? How do you allocate these rights to a certain data sets? I mean, we could think of the logistics sector or even mobility sector, where you have tons of different players and tons of different interests also relating to the data exchanges. And that's the idea that we pursue with these data spaces in general.
All right, very good. Thank you very much. I'm going to the next questions. Again, it's which opportunity will this open for European economies? Astrid touched it a little bit upon it. Let's say, and as well, can you maybe a bit of rephrase or go maybe much into details with giving some? We're talking about Tesla or IoT. I know when we were preparing the discussion with Anna, we were saying that because it's not only a lock-in effect with only, let's say, the supplier getting the data, but it's also the other suppliers. It's all about this maybe lower cost or more competition for a given service or goods. If we can maybe talk a little bit again about this, what is the added value, let's say, for the companies?
Well, I think the way I see this, what the EU is doing is kind of a democratization of the access to data. So I see the Data Act as part of a bigger picture, or as one piece in a larger puzzle, where you have the Data Act that makes it possible or regulates how you can share data, business to business, business to government, and also business to consumer. But together with that, you have the Open Data Directive that makes all open data from the public sector available. And you have the Data Governance Act that gives a set of rules on how to share the data that are protected. So be it personal data, confidential data, trade secrets, etc. So with those three, we basically have the opportunity to share all kinds of data. And then as a next step, you have the Artificial Intelligence Act that is also in process that makes it possible to use all this data in new ways and to get more out of them. So we get a completely different level of access to data, and we get new tools to use the data in new ways and to use artificial intelligence in a safe way. So I think it creates a lot of opportunities to European companies, and it's all also drafted with SMEs in particular in mind. So protecting, because most European companies are small or medium-sized or even micro businesses. Mm-hmm. So they will have a much stronger role in the markets. They will be more competitive because they will get access to a completely different knowledge base. So we can provide data-driven services, create new products, and so on. Okay. So I think there is a huge potential for all kinds of businesses within all kinds of different sectors. So it's, I think the challenge is to be creative and to think about what you can actually do with these data.
Yeah, no, very good point. Fully agree. Anna, do you want to add anything on this?
No, I think it was very well put, and it's indeed also what we envision with the Data Act is more business models, of course, in Europe, and also benefiting SMEs in the use of data in innovative solutions based on data. That's the basic idea.
Okay, thank you very much. So now the question is, let's say we have a very clear explanation. We have, let's say, the added value for the company side. What is, let's say, the agenda? Maybe Anna, if you can lead us through, say, what has been done so far? Where do we stand? What is the next step? So that, let's say, from the company side, we have a better understanding where we go. And maybe we can also start to plan and put this into our planning, that this is coming up, and inform our team, inform our partners, and have really embed this into our strategy. Because if it's new business model, new offering, we need to think about it a little bit beforehand. So can you lead us about the next milestones, Anna, please?
Sure. So the proposal was out in February, and since then we have, under the French presidency, of course, already started discussions in the Council Working Party, and now the Czech presidency took over the first comments that the member states made on the text, and there are first drafting sessions taking place. And of course, we as a Commission are interested to proceed with the file as fast as possible, and I think the Czechs have could even reach a general approach by the end of the year, maybe. And then the question is what happens on the side of the EP. The EP just came to an end with the discussions, I think, on the question of responsibility on the file. So ITRE is going to be in the lead with Pilar del Castillo as a rapporteur, and other committees will also be competent to look at special fields, especially Juri, Liebe, and IMCO, also looking at the file very closely at specific fields, and also at the file as a general, in general. And so I think when will we end with all the negotiations? That is a bit speculative right now, but I mean, it would be great if we could reach already an agreement next year. And then of course, there will be also a transposition, not a transposition, but an application time then of the adopted act. So it will all take time. So just saying it will not be enforced tomorrow. But as you could see from the DGA, for example, that went very quickly. So the negotiations were done after a year, and it's already adopted, and it will apply next year in September. So maybe if you compare that, we are very well aware that the Data Act has much more of controversial and important kind of topics with a larger maybe impact. So that might be also, then take a bit longer, but our ambition is high.
Very good, very good. That's important. Just looking at my questions. So on my side, I'm done with my questions. Let me look at the chat if we have some questions. So we have one question from Adrian Wicks. Thank you, Adrian. So what's the estimation for how much time with the implementation of the infrastructure tech? I can imagine, for example, that healthcare IT service providers won't migrate all their systems to be interoperable in less than a year. I don't know if you have any insight on this question.
Yeah, there will definitely be a deferred application, so there will be time to adapt, but it's also not the intention to have the whole system being interoperable. So that depends a bit on the use case, how much of actual changes will have to be will have to be realized. I think one of the hardest points will be, for example, the design obligation in the chapter 2. So for enabling the access to IoT, the manufacturers will also have to design their objects in a way so that the access is as easy as possible. And that, of course, then means that also the design needs to be changed of some object, and it will take time. It's clear.
Just a question regarding to this, because when we were talking with Astrid, I think Astrid, you were mentioning that it could be in the end 7 spaces for 7 industries. Is it the correct number of spaces that that are in mind? I know about the healthcare, that's one, that is, let's say, the first one, but there's 6 others, is it correct, in terms of spaces?
Actually, now the last number that I have seen is 12 different data spaces. And I think there will be more coming, but I have a list here that it's health, agriculture, manufacturing, energy, mobility, financial, public administration, skills, the European Open Science Cloud, and then for Green Deal objectives. And then there are 2 added for media and cultural heritage.
Okay, so 12.
So as far as I know, those are the ones for now, but there will then probably also be others coming for other sectors.
Okay.
So together it will be the entire, as I mentioned, this kind of large internal market for data.
Okay, okay. And anything to add on this point?
Yeah, I think 11 were announced with the strategy, and then there was another one, the cultural heritage one, if I'm not mistaken, added later. So I don't think there is for now the intention to have an unlimited number of data spaces, because the idea is to focus on certain strategically important sectors first. But let's see how we proceed. So that's...
Okay, thank you very much, both of you. I see there's another question in the chat from Benjamin Ogene. I hope I pronounced it right. Can you please give an example of how a company can access data about customers of another company without breaching GDPR?
It's a fair question.
Yes.
But we don't change the level of data protection. So that's the first thing maybe to note. The Data Act will not change any level, will not lower the level of data protection. So therefore, for any access, you will also be compliant, need to be compliant with the GDPR. That's something outside of the Data Act, if you allow me to formulate this way. I mean, the only situation which might be overcome is the situation where a user is the data subject itself. Let's say I use a household IT product and I want now the access to that data. So I'm the data subject that is actually where the personal data belongs to, and then I will have now a legal right to access the data under the Data Act. So it actually reinforces what is already there with the GDPR, but also goes beyond the personal data, encompasses also the non-personal data, and overcomes the issues that might have been there around Article 20 GDPR, the portability right. So I think in this regard, that's what is reinforced. In other constellations, there might be tricky ones, and that's, I think, what you are pointing at. The GDPR compliance will remain, there, and needs to be addressed, I think, with all the other also questions that might come out of the Data Act, because we don't solve every constellation horizontally in general, but there, in some provisions, you will also find the need to contractually agree then on kind of, for example, how trade secrets will be protected, etc. And all these provisions we have on contractual agreements that come on top of the GDPR compliance, and will maybe lead to a more general approach to the compliance in data sharing questions, and with that maybe also reflect the combination of both legislative files.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Yes, Astrid, please.
If I just may add briefly to that, I think when you think of Internet of Things, there's also a lot of data that are not personal data, because you have all these data being collected that are data about the technical condition of a product, for instance, that is not really data linked to a person as a user. So there is still a lot of data where this will not be an issue. So I think that's also important to keep in mind, that we are dealing with some data that will be personal data, but also a lot of data that will not be, and where GDPR is not kind of an issue, so to say.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Astrid. One question I have, I was in Lyon last week for Intech, that maybe some of you know, and it was a big discussion about EU sovereignty on innovation, on R&D, on how to work better. There was this big announcement about the 2030 material manifesto, or to really have this better coordination between industries. And let's say tomorrow this is set up and there is the space where, for example, Postal Lab is. So I go there and I can look at the data, but either it means that anyone can go into this space and look at data. Do you have already some ideas of who can access this data? Would be only European companies? I'm just wondering who can have access to this data in the end.
It is indeed conceived as a open space first. So I don't think we will conceive any rules or foresee any restrictive governance scheme for that. This is really not the intention. But also, I think maybe it's also good not to overestimate here the role of the Commission, because we will, of course, start with funding of the technical infrastructure and then have maybe yeah, of course, also navigate through what's coming up. But then a lot is also, I think, left to the stakeholders to then assess what do they actually need and how to realize this architecture. But there is no intention to limit the participation in such a space. So, I mean, the funding might be a different question, but I think that was not yours.
Yeah, okay, very good. Thank you very much, Anna. I'm looking at the chat. There's no questions. So what I propose, if there anyone that want to jump in, let's say, the discussion and just raise this question directly to Anna and Astrid, please feel free to jump in. It's an open discussion. We are here to share. So please jump in if anyone want to say, want to have a question or even a comment or written experience to share with us. Okay. But do not hesitate, otherwise it seems it has been quite clear so far. There was one thing that we discussed, Anna, also when we are preparing this concept about, I think, chapter 4, if I'm not mistaken, the fairness of the data. So we have more and more collaboration. So you have more and more exchange of information and data. And sometimes you are a supplier and it's kind of a transactional relationship. You supply the benefits. How can you give up maybe a bit more color on this fairness, or as it would be done?
Mm-hmm. As I said earlier, so the chapter 4 applies only to constellations where you have an agreement that regards also data related provisions, so on data access or use, let's say, and that contract is unilaterally imposed on an SME. That means there was no discussion about the content of the contract. So it's really one side of the contract imposes that contract on the SME without any negotiation on these clauses. And then the unfairness test would apply. And basically, it's like a controlling test that ensures that the contract will then not have certain unfair clauses where, for example, the liability is only very one-sided or the termination is very one-sided, etc. So those kind of provisions would then be prohibited either because they are presumed to be unfair as such or presumed to be unfair depending on the details of the specific case. And then there is also a general clause where we say it's deemed unfair if it grossly deviates from commercial practice. So there might be a little bit more room for interpretation in certain scenarios. Yeah, so basically this test, as I said earlier, aims to bring the SME back to the negotiating table and really enable the SME to have a say in what is and how the data is dealt with, because you can also conceive many co-generating scenarios where it's important, I think, that both parties of the contract would then have a say in who gets to actually use the data, maybe also after the termination of the contracts, who can continue to make use of the contract and for what. And the unfairness test should, of course, also be a tool that this data is not only used to the benefit of maybe only one side of the contract, but both sides can take their advantages, their benefits out of it, because the idea of the Data Act is in general to, of course, promote this kind of more actors can use the data for more ends.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anna, for the clarification. I appreciate this. So again, if you have any question, do not hesitate to jump in. What I may propose, that maybe Anna, Astrid, if there is any points that we did not cover yet, but that's of importance to know. If you think about, let's say, anything that was not covered or maybe not clear, or please, let's say, please share anything that we did not cover yet. Maybe Anna, Astrid, if you're thinking about anything.
Well, I can say that I think this is interesting because the EU Commission is extremely ambitious on sharing of data. And data is already a very important commodity, and we are generating more and more data. So the EU is actually pushing the member states, and also Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein, that are part of the internal market. The EU is pushing us to go further in sharing data and allowing more access to data, which means that more both public sector bodies, but also private sector, academia, we have a much better access to data. We can use it in better and more ways. So I think it's important that also you that are here representing different businesses, that you are aware of what is coming, and that we actually stand ready to use these opportunities when the legislation is adopted, so that we are prepared and we know and understand what is coming, and we see the opportunities this brings.
Yes, I fully agree. Anna?
Yes, I also fully agree with what Astrid said. Maybe just to mention another element which is sometimes misconceived in the Data Act, it's maybe the provision on international data transfer of non-personal data. So that's a provision that you will find similarly in also the Data Governance Act. So that doesn't mean any data localization. That's the first message that I want to bring across. It really doesn't mean that data needs to be stored in Europe or anything. What it does is foreseeing safeguards for requests from governments, from third countries, basically governmental data access requests, and then cloud service provider, with regard to non-personal data, I have to add, because of course, with regard to personal data, the GDPR already regulates everything around also international data transfers. But with regard to non-personal data, we foresee here safeguards by saying that a cloud service provider that gets a request, let's say, from a foreign government secret service or anything, that it could then basically have an assessment whether this is considered a lawful request or not. And if it's not a lawful request in our view, then it would be able to reject those requests, and with that protect the users of cloud services here in Europe, in their interest, of course, also to protect their trade secrets, etc., that are probably stored in that cloud. So it is an additional safeguard to what we have with the GDPR, but it doesn't mean that data needs to be localized, or that any kind of transfer outside the EU is being more complicated now. Not at all. It really regards this very specific case of governmental access requests.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Anna. Trace, I think there's a question that goes into what you mentioned. Will the legislation be applicable to companies outside of the EU which have customers in EU, for example, UK or US companies?
It will apply to companies offering products on the European market. So once you offer the IoT product on the European market, then of course the provisions apply. That is especially, I think, important for chapter 2 and 3. And I think for the rest, there should not be so much complication about the scope. It's an internal market instrument. It cannot go beyond our borders.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Benjamin, for your question. We appreciate this. Good. So I'm just looking if we have everything covered. Changing interoperability. Okay. Maybe Anu, you have a question? Maybe come up to your mind.
Yeah, so I've it's been a great session. I wasn't aware much about a lot of data security and EU Data Act, and it been very insightful for me. So I think most of the doubts or queries which I was having in my mind was covered by Astrid and Anna, but still I would like to know how maybe I'm repeating the question, maybe how it would help in the bilateral trade with non-EU companies.
in the bilateral trade, I don't see so much affecting those kind of agreements existing because it doesn't have this trade element. It shouldn't have that. I don't know, Astrid, do you have a take on that?
Not really. I would say the same as you, that I don't really think that it will affect international trade. So it's more about giving consumers, whether it's people or businesses in Europe, a better access and a more fair competitive market, for instance.
Cool. Yeah, thank you so much.
Actually, Astrid, I have one question for you, because we've been talking about the milestones that's European level, but at your level, in what you do every day, what are the next steps, or how do you talk about this EU Data Act to your different stakeholders? Because you were saying that this needs to be known, this is important, this is a change of mindset, this is very important for the company. How do you do this on the field, if I may say, Astrid, in Norway?
Well, in the Resource Center for Sharing of Data, where I work in the national agency, we try to be in contact with, very much all parts of the public sector, but also with private companies and with academia and others, and to really make it easier to share data. And we see a lot, for instance, that very often people are holding back more than necessary because the legislation is complicated and you have a lot of different laws. You have GDPR, but also other sectoral laws, for instance, national legislation, that creates a quite difficult picture of what you can and cannot do when it comes to sharing of data. So we try to support on that and show the legal room for maneuver, what you can actually do within today's framework. And then we also try to raise awareness on what is coming. So these coming acts from the EU, which always reaches Norway a little bit later, because we have the additional process of adopting the legislation into the EEA agreement. So we're always a little bit behind, but we try then at least to prepare as good as we can and to raise the awareness so that also others affected by the legislation can be ready to see what is coming and to be ready both to comply with the legislation, but also to use these opportunities that they get.
Okay.
So what we do is a lot trying to talk to people.
Thank you very much, Anna.
Trying to meet as many as possible.
Thank you very much, Astrid. Actually, I have one question maybe for both of you. For all of us out there that's just discovered, let's say, EU Data Act much more into details, do you recommend any source of information, any websites that we can subscribe to newsletter or get there whenever there's something? Do you have any websites or sources to recommend to us that we maybe can already share in the chat with the attenders today?
I would say for me, it's largely the EU Commission website. And I'm not paid by the EU Commission. But I think you find a lot of useful information there.
Is there a dedicated part on the EU Data Act on the EU Commission website, maybe, Anna?
Yes, there should definitely be some sites with information. I would have to look up the link actually to send it to you.
Okay.
I think to me the easiest way is normally to use Google.
Okay.
And if you Google the Data Act, or if you want a bigger picture with a bit more of the context, to Google the EU Data Strategy, then you get a bit also the context around the Data Act, which is also useful to understand.
Okay. Okay, thank you. But if you have any of the sources, you can send it to me, Astrid and Anna. I will share it with the attendees. It will be quite interesting. I see another question. Maybe it's going to be the last one from Moro. Sorry for my ignorance, but in which way we can keep the advantages competitive, that is strategic to drive the market? Are multinational company open for this? Maybe Anna, what do you think?
Well, if I understand the question correctly, then it's about are we doing the right thing, and is it maybe not also a disadvantage for the European companies then being forced to open up and not that could possibly no longer be competitive on a global level? And we hear this fear, of course, from stakeholders, no question, but we see larger opportunities than the risks, that there might be as well, because also we of course have the hope that it will, especially when a multinational company is in scope, it could possibly even have an effect beyond the internal market if you decide, for example, also to then allow for these opportunities to access the data outside the EU. Could be the case, right? And then we think that also, and we hope that also the manufacturers will benefit from opening up, not only because the access regime is not conceived for free, there is a compensation by the third parties, but also because that there will be more innovation, and with that possibly also digital solutions that benefit the manufacturers themselves and their business.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So look at the time. So what I propose, we are going to thank you very much from Elga O. Nemo for the information about digitaleurope.org as a source of information. Thank you very much for sharing this. We're just going to share our screen with you for a little survey, to know, let's say, what you think about the event, if it was actually in line with what you were expecting. That's very important for our speakers, for us, to know, let's say, how you are satisfied with this workshop. So we'll share with you the QR code, right, again?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me share with you the QR code. Thank you, Astrid, for sharing the link again. Okay. All right, so we're sharing it with you in 1 minute. So now you should see it. So if you can just scan it and then enter the question, let's say, how did it, let's say, fulfill your expectation of today? And do not hesitate, let's say, to share other feedback about today's session. It will help us to keep on doing the workshop and to try to make it better every time. And then we do a closing with the speakers. Okay, let's see if we have some feedback about the output of the discussion. Not yet. Okay. Do not see any feedback yet. Hopefully it was good. Let's go back to the chat. I would like to check something. Anna, thank you for European Data Strategy, European Commission. So thank you very much for sharing this information as well. I would like to thank, let's say, Anna and Astrid, our guest of today. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your explanation. It was a very good and practical information that you shared with us today. So thank you very much in the name of the audience for your time. Appreciate. Have a great day, all of you, also to all the participants of today. And viel Glück, like we say in German. All the best in whatever you do on the personal side. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for inviting. Goodbye.